The observation deck of the Galactic Council's enforcement cruiser hummed with the usual mechanical efficiency. But today something felt different. Commander Vrelk of the Axiom Coalition stood with his 3 primary arms crossed, watching the blue and green planet rotate below through the viewport. His scales rippled with irritation. "Another human colony," he muttered, his translator converting his clicking speech into standard galactic. "Why do they keep spreading like fungus?" His second-in-command, Lieutenant Thorpe, a being who resembled a floating jellyfish with far too many eyes, drifted closer. "The settlement appears small, sir. 300 inhabitants, mostly agricultural. Should be a simple enforcement action." Vrelk's mandibles clicked in what his species considered a smile, though most others found it terrifying. "Simple. Have you read the reports about these creatures? They're mad, absolutely insane. Sir, with respect, they're classified as a Class 2 intelligence, barely past the sentience trials. How dangerous could they possibly be?" That's what the Hargath thought before first contact. That's what the Zillion Empire assumed before the border disputes. And look where they are now. Thorpe's eye stalks quivered nervously. Dead? Worse. Trading partners. Vrelk spat the words like they tasted foul. "Now stop your wobbling and prepare the landing party. The Council wants this settlement cleared for proper colonization protocol. Something about the humans building too close to a protected biosphere." 3 hours later, Vrelk wished he'd called in sick. The landing party consisted of 12 heavily armed coalition soldiers, each representing a different species from across the galaxy. They'd brought plasma rifles, shock grenades, and enough firepower to level a small mountain. Protocol demanded overwhelming force when dealing with potential resistance, and the coalition never did anything halfway. The human settlement spread before them like a collection of prefabricated boxes scattered by a careless child. Gardens sprawled between structures, and something that might have been livestock grazed in distant pens. Smoke rose from several chimneys, carrying the scent of burning wood and something else, something organic and strangely appetizing. "Spread out," Vrelk ordered. "Find the settlement leader. We'll give them the standard eviction notice and 48 hours to evacuate." What nobody had bothered to mention in the briefing, what apparently didn't make it into the official reports because some bureaucrat thought it irrelevant, was that this particular settlement sat on the edge of a nature preserve. Not a human nature preserve, which would have been documented and filed properly. No, this was a preserve for Earth creatures that the colonists had, for reasons nobody could adequately explain, decided to bring with them across the stars. Private Kellax, a 4-armed soldier from Targos Prime, was the first to notice something wrong. "Sir, movement in the brush, multiple signatures, they're not human." Vrelk's scales bristled. "Indigenous life? Negative. Database identifies them as Earth fauna, something called Mustelidae mellivora. Speak basic, soldier. Honey badgers, sir, and, several juveniles." The commander's species didn't have eyebrows, but if they did, his would have reached his hairline, assuming he had hair, which he didn't. Badgers, as in small furry creatures. That's your threat assessment? Kellax's primary eyes fixed on his scanner while his secondary eyes watched the tree line. "According to the database, these animals have a reputation, sir. Says here they're, quote, indifferent to personal safety, immune to most venoms, and possess an aggressive territorial nature that, unquote, defies all logical survival instincts." It's a rodent. Actually, sir, I don't care, Vrelk snapped. They're animals. We're armed with weapons that can punch holes through starship hulls. Continue the advance. That's when they heard the crying. It started as a small sound, barely audible over the wind rustling through the strange earth trees that the colonists had somehow managed to grow in alien soil. But it grew louder, transforming into the unmistakable wailing of a distressed child. Sergeant Plix, whose species had hearing receptors that could detect a heartbeat from 50 meters away, pointed toward a small clearing. There, humanoid juvenile, approximately 4 to 5 years by their developmental standards. The child sat in the middle of what appeared to be a play area, surrounded by overturned toys and the remains of what might have been a small wooden fortress. She couldn't have been more than waist-high to a human adult, with tangled dark hair and a face streaked with tears and something that might have been berry juice or blood. With humans, it was hard to tell. "Secure the juvenile," Vrelk ordered. "We'll use her to bring the adults to us, much more efficient than searching every structure." 6 soldiers moved forward, weapons lowered but active. Standard intimidation posture. The child looked up at them with eyes that were far too large and far too blue, and her crying intensified into proper screaming. "Mama! Papa! Monsters!" "Monsters," Kellex muttered. "We're a certified peacekeeping force." "Try telling that to a species that only achieved faster-than-light travel 70 years ago," Thorpe replied, his gelatinous form rippling with what might have been amusement. "To them, we probably look like nightmares." The soldiers formed a loose circle around the child, who had now progressed from screaming to that peculiar hiccuping sob that juvenile humans apparently specialized in. One of the soldiers, a being named Court, whose species valued efficiency over empathy, reached down to grab the small human's arm. That's when they heard the growl. It wasn't a big sound, not at first, just a low rumble that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, like distant thunder rolling across an alien sky. But it carried a promise in it, a threat that transcended species and spoke directly to the prey instinct that evolution had carved into every sentient being, regardless of how many weapons they carried. "Sir?" Kellex's voice had gone up an octave. "The badgers, they're moving, fast." The first one came out of the underbrush like a missile with fur and teeth. It wasn't large, maybe half a meter long, with a distinctive white stripe running from its nose to its tail. But what it lacked in size, it made up for in sheer, undiluted rage. The honey badger hit Court in the leg with enough force to knock him sideways. Teeth that had evolved to crack turtle shells punched through standard military-grade armor like it was decorative paper. Court screamed, a sound that his species only made when facing imminent death, and tried to bring his weapon around. The badger didn't care. That became immediately apparent as the small creature proceeded to demonstrate why its species had earned a reputation back on Earth for being, quote, nature's way of telling everything else to go to hell. It twisted, bit, clawed, and generally made it clear that standard rules of engagement meant absolutely nothing to a creature that had once been filmed fighting off 6 lions over a meal. "Shoot it!" Vrelk screamed. "Shoot the cursed thing!" 3 plasma bolts lit up the afternoon air, each capable of turning a concrete wall into vapor. 2 missed entirely as the badger moved with the kind of speed that suggested caffeine and pure spite. The third grazed its side, singeing fur and probably doing some damage. The honey badger paused, looked down at the burn, looked back up at the soldiers, and then, in a display that would be analyzed by xenobiologists for years to come, it seemed to shrug, as if to say, "Really? That's your best shot?" Then it went back to systematically destroying Court's armor, morale, and will to live. "There's more!" Kellex shouted, and he wasn't exaggerating. 4 smaller shapes burst from the same patch of undergrowth, moving in a coordinated pattern that suggested either pack intelligence or a shared commitment to absolute chaos. The cubs, because that's what they were, came at the soldiers from different angles, their smaller forms somehow even more terrifying than their mother because they had all of her aggression and none of her experience-tempered restraint. The first cub latched onto Lieutenant Thorpe's lower tentacle. This presented a unique problem, because Thorpe's species didn't have bones to protect soft tissue. The cub's teeth went straight through gelatinous flesh, and the lieutenant's scream transcended audio frequency ranges, hitting notes that shattered 2 equipment displays and made everyone's teeth hurt. "Fall back," Vrelk ordered, all thoughts of intimidation and efficient operations vanishing like smoke in a hurricane. "Fall back to the shuttle." But the settlement had come alive. Humans poured out of buildings, dozens of them, moving with the kind of coordinated purpose that came from drilling for exactly this scenario. They weren't holding weapons, not the plasma rifles or shock batons that standard security forces carried. No, these humans held farming implements, construction tools, and in one notable case, what appeared to be a cast-iron cooking pan. A woman who might have been the child's mother sprinted past the confused soldiers, scooped up the crying girl in one smooth motion, and turned to face the coalition forces with an expression that suggested she'd very much like to have words. Harsh words, possibly violent words. "You pointed guns at my daughter," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone that species across the galaxy had learned to recognize as a prelude to violence. "At my 4-year-old baby." Vrelk tried to salvage the situation. "Madam, we're here on official council business. We're authorized to—" "I don't care if you're authorized by God himself," the woman cut him off. "You pointed weapons at my child." The adult honey badger, having reduced court to a whimpering pile of regret and torn armor, moved to stand beside the woman. The cubs assembled themselves into a loose formation around them both, creating a defensive perimeter that shouldn't have been possible for animals with brains the size of walnuts. But honey badgers had never read the manual on what was possible, and they'd established long ago that they didn't care about probability, physics, or the Geneva Convention. "We didn't harm her," Thorpe tried to explain, his voice strained as he attempted to regenerate the chunk of himself currently being digested in a cub's stomach. "We were merely attempting to secure the area per standard procedure?" A man emerged from the largest building, probably the settlement's leader based on how the other humans deferred to him. He was tall by human standards, with graying hair and the kind of weathered face that came from years of outdoor work. "Is it standard procedure to terrorize children? To come in with enough firepower to vaporize a city block and wave it around near a playground?" "Sir, we're here to deliver an eviction notice." Vrelk tried again, his translator struggling to convey the proper authoritative tone. "The council has determined that this settlement violates protected biosphere protocols. You have 48 hours to evacuate." The man smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. It was the kind of smile that predators wore just before they reminded everyone why they were at the top of the food chain. 48 hours? To pack up everything we've built over 3 years? To abandon our homes because some committee light years away decided we're inconvenient? "It's not personal, sir. It's policy." "You know what else is policy?" The woman still holding her daughter spoke up again. "Earth Coalition Self-Defense Protocols, Section 7, Subsection 3. Any threat to human juveniles on registered colony worlds permits full defensive response, including lethal force, without prior warning." Vrelk's scales went cold. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" The woman gestured to the surrounding buildings. "Everyone here passed advanced weapons certification before we left Earth. We're farmers, yes. Engineers, teachers, doctors. But we're also every single one of us trained combat veterans. That's required for frontier colonies." "You can't possibly think you can fight the Galactic Council," Thorpe sputtered. The settlement leader laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Can't we? Ask the Hargath how their invasion went. Ask the Zillion Empire about the border wars. Hell, ask the Kryn Confederacy about the incident at New Singapore. Humans have a saying, Commander. Do not go gentle into that good night. You know what that means?" Vrelk didn't, but he suspected he was about to find out. "It means we don't surrender. It means we don't back down. And it especially means that when someone threatens our children, our families, our homes, we stop being civilized and remember that we're a species that climbed to the top of the food chain on a death world by being too stubborn to die." The adult honey badger chose that moment to growl again, a sound that suggested enthusiastic agreement with the sentiment. "And these?" The woman gestured to the badger and cubs. "We brought them from Earth because someone decided we needed pest control. Turns out, honey badgers don't just eat pests. They adopt humans they like. They protect territory they consider theirs. And they really, really don't like it when someone threatens the babies." As if to emphasize the point, all 4 cubs sat down in perfect unison, fixing the soldiers with stares that suggested they were mentally measuring everyone for coffins. One of the younger soldiers, a recruit named Vilp, who'd joined the coalition because he thought it would be safe and boring, raised his weapon with shaking appendages. "Sir, orders?" Vrelk looked at the armed humans, the impossibly aggressive Earth fauna, and the small child who'd stopped crying and now watched the proceedings with the kind of intense focus that suggested she was memorizing faces for future reference. He thought about the reports, the casualty lists from previous human encounters, and the fact that his pension wouldn't mean much if he was dead. "Lower your weapons," he said quietly. "Sir?" Kelak sounded confused. "I said lower them. All of you, weapons down now." The soldiers complied, though several kept their appendages near their holsters in case things went even more sideways than they already had. "Now," Vrelk said, forcing his scales to lie flat in a gesture of non-aggression. "Perhaps we can discuss this situation rationally." The settlement leader crossed his arms. "Discuss what? You came here to throw us off our own land." "The council's decision can be appealed," the woman interrupted. "Section 19 of the Colony Rights Charter. Any eviction order can be challenged if evidence suggests undue harm to established populations, especially when children are involved." "That's technically correct," Thorpe admitted reluctantly. "Technically?" The woman's eyebrows rose. "I was a lawyer before I was a farmer, Lieutenant. I know the charter better than most council members, and I know that pointing military-grade weapons at unarmed children violates about 7 different interstellar laws." Vrelk felt his career ambitions crumbling like ancient stone. "We didn't actually fire at her." "No, but you threatened to. And these badgers?" The woman smiled, and it was somehow more frightening than her earlier anger. "They're registered emotional support animals. Attacking them is classified as assault on medical assistance creatures. That's a Class A violation that carries mandatory prison time." "They're emotional support. They're killing machines." "They're whatever their registration papers say they are," the settlement leader replied. "And right now, those papers say they're beloved family pets who were defending their territory from armed intruders. Which, from a certain perspective, is exactly what happened." The adult honey badger yawned, displaying teeth that still had bits of quartz armor wedged between them. Vrelk realized, with the clarity that comes from staring down complete disaster, that he'd been thoroughly outmaneuvered by a group of farmers and their psychotic pets. "What do you want?" "Simple," the woman said. "You file a report stating that the settlement is in full compliance with all relevant protocols. You recommend that the eviction order be rescinded pending proper environmental impact studies, which we'll happily cooperate with. And you leave. Immediately." "And if we refuse?" The settlement leader glanced at the honey badger, which was now grooming one of its cubs with what might have been affection if it wasn't occasionally interrupted by growls at the soldiers. "Then we'll let nature take its course. And trust me, Commander, you don't want that. These badgers, they're the friendly ones. We've got 3 more families in the North Pasture that aren't nearly as socialized." "You're insane," Vrelk whispered. "No," the woman corrected, adjusting her daughter on her hip. "We're human. There's a difference. We came out here to build something, to make a home, and we'll protect that home with everything we have. Whether it's legal documents, plasma rifles, or small furry creatures with aggression issues." "The council won't accept this," Thorpe warned. "Then the council can come explain it to us personally. In person, on our territory, with proper advance notice and maybe some peace offerings. We're reasonable people, Lieutenant. We just don't respond well to bullying." Vrelk looked at his soldiers, most of whom were injured, frightened, or both. He looked at the humans, armed with farming equipment and backed by animals that had no business being as dangerous as they were. He thought about the report he'd have to file, the debriefing he'd have to endure, and the fact that his commanding officer was going to make the rest of his career very unpleasant. Then he looked at the little girl, who waved at him with sticky fingers and smiled like she hadn't just watched her defenders systematically destroy a trained military unit. "Fine," he said. "We'll file the report. But this isn't over." "It never is," the settlement leader agreed. "But here's something to remember, Commander. Every time you come at us, we get stronger. Every time you try to move us, we dig in deeper. That's what humans do. We adapt, we overcome, and we absolutely refuse to quit, even when quitting would be the smart choice." The honey badger rumbled in agreement, and its cubs tumbled over each other in what might have been play or combat practice. With badgers, it was hard to tell. As the coalition forces retreated to their shuttle, armor damaged and pride thoroughly demolished, Vrelk heard the little girl ask her mother a question in their native language. "Mama, why did the funny aliens run away?" The woman's answer carried on the wind, clear enough for his translator to catch. "Because, sweetie, they learned an important lesson today. Never mess with humans, and especially never, ever mess with their babies." The shuttle doors closed behind them, and Vrelk slumped into his command chair, already dreading the conversation he'd have to have with headquarters. Behind them, the settlement returned to its normal afternoon routine, as if nothing unusual had happened. The humans went back to their farming, their construction, their daily lives. And the honey badgers, those impossible creatures that defied all logic and self-preservation instinct, settled down for naps in sunny patches of grass, their cubs playing nearby. Somewhere in the cosmos, bureaucrats would shuffle papers and argue about protocols. But here, on this frontier world, the message had been delivered with perfect clarity. The Earthborn child was protected, not just by her parents, not just by her community, but by creatures that had earned their reputation across an entire planet for simply not caring about the odds, the danger, or the consequences. They'd pointed weapons at a human child, and they'd learned why that was a mistake. The hard way. The Council's response arrived 3 weeks later, and it wasn't what anyone expected. Instead of reinforcements or another enforcement team, they sent a single shuttle carrying Ambassador Trillix, a Centaurian diplomat known for actually reading files before making decisions. This was apparently revolutionary behavior in Council circles, which explained why most of their operations ended in what official reports called unforeseen complications, and what everyone else called predictable disasters. Mayor Jack Brennan, the settlement leader who'd faced down Commander Vrelk, stood at the landing pad with his arms crossed and his expression carefully neutral. Beside him stood Emma Torres, the former lawyer-turned-farmer who'd cited interstellar law while holding her daughter. And at their feet, because apparently nobody had thought to mention this might be a bad idea, sat Maggie the honey badger with 3 of her 4 cubs. The 4th cub, a particularly enthusiastic youngster the colonists had named Chaos for obvious reasons, was currently attempting to dig under the landing pad's foundation. Why? Because it was there. Honey badgers didn't need better reasons than that. Trillix emerged from the shuttle looking like someone who'd spent the entire flight reviewing footage and regretting every career choice that had led to this moment. Her species, the Centaurians, resembled oversized mantises with better posture and an unfortunate tendency toward bureaucratic precision. She carried a datapad in her secondary manipulators and wore what passed for formal diplomatic attire among her people. "Mayor Brennan," she began, her translator rendering her clicking speech into perfect basic. "I've come to discuss the situation regarding protected biosphere protocols and the settlement's future." "Ambassador," Jack kept his tone polite but firm, "appreciate you coming in person instead of sending more soldiers." Trillix's antennae twitched in what might have been embarrassment. "Yes, well, after reviewing Commander Vrelk's report, along with the 17 formal complaints filed by your settlement and the rather compelling video evidence of the incident, the Council felt a more diplomatic approach was warranted." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Video evidence? Your settlement's security system captured everything. The footage has been quite popular on the Galactic Network, particularly the segment where the honey badger appeared to shrug after being shot. That's become what I believe humans call a meme." "Maggie's famous." Jack glanced down at the badger, who was currently grooming herself and ignoring the conversation entirely. "She's going to be insufferable." Maggie sneezed. which in honey badger language might have meant anything from "I don't care" to "Where's my next meal?" to "I could destroy you, but I'm too comfortable right now." Trilix consulted her datapad, her mandibles clicking in concentration. The Council has several concerns that need addressing. First, the matter of the protected biosphere. The zone you've settled borders a region designated for preservation under the Ecological Conservation Act. "We know," Emma said. "We reviewed the surveys before we landed. Our settlement is specifically positioned to avoid the protected zone. We're 3 kilometers outside the boundary." "Yes, but your agricultural activities extend closer." "Our gardens and orchards, you mean?" Jack's expression hardened. "The ones we planted with native soil amendments specifically designed not to contaminate the protected area. The ones we monitor daily for environmental impact? Those agricultural activities?" Trilix's antennae drooped. The initial report suggested unauthorized expansion. "The initial report was filed by someone who wanted this land for commercial mining," Emma countered. "Someone who conveniently forgot to mention that our settlement has been here for 3 years without a single environmental violation. Want to guess who stands to profit if we're removed?" The ambassador's silence spoke volumes. "Councillor Prax of the Orion Development Corporation," Emma continued. "He purchased mineral rights to this sector 2 months ago. Our settlement sits on top of his potential extraction sites. This isn't about environmental protection, it's about profit margins." Trilix set down her datapad with a gesture that suggested resignation. "You've done your research." "I was a lawyer, Ambassador. Research is what I do." "What she does when she's not growing prize-winning tomatoes," Jack added. "Turns out legal skills transfer well to bureaucratic combat." One of the honey badger cubs, a female the colonists had named Duchess because she carried herself with unearned confidence, decided this was an excellent time to investigate the ambassador's shuttle. She waddled over to the landing struts and began testing them for structural integrity by biting them. "Should someone—" Trilix gestured nervously at Duchess. "She's fine," Jack said. "Those struts are reinforced titanium alloy. Worst she can do is dull her baby teeth." As if accepting the challenge, Duchess bit harder, and a concerning creak echoed from the strut. "Then again," Jack amended, "maybe Emma should grab her." Emma scooped up the cub, who immediately began squirming and making the angry squeaking noises that juvenile honey badgers apparently practiced for their entire lives. "Sorry, they're teething." "On Starship components?" "They're not picky. Last week one of them tried to eat a plasma cutter while it was on." Trilix's antennae went rigid with what might have been horror or fascination. "Possibly both." "And the creature survived?" "Got a singed whisker and learned absolutely nothing from the experience. That's honey badgers for you. Pain is apparently just data they choose to ignore." The ambassador looked at Maggie, who had moved on from grooming to staring directly at Trilix with an intensity that suggested she was calculating exactly how many bites it would take to reach something vital. "These animals concern me." "They should," Jack agreed cheerfully. "They concern everyone. That's part of their charm." "I fail to see the charm in creatures that attack trained soldiers." Emma's expression cooled. "Those trained soldiers pointed weapons at my 4-year-old daughter." Maggie responded appropriately. "We all did." "By unleashing violent animals?" "By protecting our children. There's a difference, Ambassador. And if the Council can't understand that difference, then we've got bigger problems than property disputes." Trilix picked up her datapad again, scrolling through information that made her mandibles click faster. "The legal situation is complex. Councillor Prax has significant influence. His corporation provides substantial funding to Council operations." "So you're saying money talks?" Jack's voice carried an edge. "I'm saying the situation requires careful navigation. However," Trilix paused, her antennae rotating toward the settlement buildings. "I've reviewed your environmental impact reports. They're exemplary. Your agricultural methods actually improve soil quality. Your water management systems benefit local wildlife. And your presence has deterred poachers who were illegally hunting in the protected zone." "We know," Emma said. "We've filed reports on 7 separate poaching operations. Got convictions on 5 of them, Would have been 7, but 2 of the groups ran into Maggie during patrol. Patrol? She likes to walk the perimeter at night. Keeps everyone honest. Maggie yawned, displaying teeth that had been scientifically proven to crack bones that would break steel cables. The honey badger's reputation wasn't exaggerated. If anything, it was understated for the sake of maintaining some species' sanity. Trillix consulted her notes again. There's also the matter of the emotional support animal registration. The medical documentation appears legitimate, but the classification seems unusual given the creature's aggressive nature. Post-traumatic stress doesn't care about what's convenient, Ambassador. Emma's voice softened. Half this settlement consists of refugees from the frontier wars. We've got people here who watched worlds burn, who lost families, who still wake up screaming from nightmares about things that actually happened. And you know what helps? She gestured to Maggie and the cubs. These stubborn, fearless, absolutely insane creatures who don't care about trauma or fear or anything except being themselves. You can't fake emotions around a honey badger. They don't understand pretense. They're just pure, uncomplicated survival instinct wrapped in fur. That's comforting when your own survival instincts are broken. Trillix was quiet for a long moment. I wasn't aware. Most people aren't. They see the weapon certifications and military backgrounds and assume we're all stable. But stability is relative, Ambassador. We came out here to build something peaceful, to grow things instead of destroying them. And yes, we'll defend that peace with violence if necessary, but that doesn't mean we want to. Yet you threaten Council forces. We protected our children, Jack corrected. There's a difference. Commander Vrelk came here with overwhelming force and zero diplomacy. He scared a 4-year-old girl badly enough that she still has nightmares. That's not acceptable, regardless of what corporate interests are behind it. As if summoned by the discussion, the 4-year-old in question emerged from a nearby building, holding her mother's hand. Little Maya Brennan, whose terrified crying had triggered the entire incident, looked perfectly fine now. She wore overalls covered in dirt stains and carried a small bucket full of what appeared to be vegetables. "Daddy, I picked carrots," she announced proudly. "That's great, sweetie. Come say hello to our guest." Maya approached with the absolute fearlessness of a child who'd grown up around honey badgers and assumed everything was safe. She looked up at Trillix with wide, curious eyes. "You're really tall. Are you a bug?" "Maya," Emma said warningly. "What?" "She looks like the bugs in my encyclopedia, but bigger, and with clothes." Trillix's translator actually hiccuped, trying to convey what was probably intense diplomatic mortification. "I am a centaurian, young one. We evolved from different ancestors than your Earth insects." "Oh, sorry." Maya thought about this. "Do you eat leaves?" "No." "Do you bite?" "Not typically." "Okay, you can stay then." Having made this pronouncement, Maya turned her attention to more important matters, specifically showing her carrots to Duchess, who sniffed them with intense concentration before attempting to steal one. "No, Duchess, these are for dinner." Maya giggled as the cub tried again, more persistent this time. "Mama, Duchess is being bad again." Emma picked up both child and cub, one in each arm, managing both with the practiced ease of someone who'd been doing it for years. "Sorry, Ambassador. Nap time politics. We can continue inside if you'd like. Actually discuss solutions instead of just problems." Trillix glanced at her shuttle, probably calculating whether she could escape back to the safety of interstellar bureaucracy where problems stayed theoretical. But then her antennae focused on Maya, still giggling as Duchess tried to groom her face with a tongue that had evolved to handle snake venom. "Very well," the ambassador said. "Let's discuss solutions." The settlement's main hall was exactly what you'd expect from a frontier colony with more optimism than resources. Mismatched furniture, walls decorated with children's artwork alongside maps and agricultural charts, and a smell that suggested something delicious was cooking in the communal kitchen. About 30 colonists had gathered, representing the settlement's governing committee and apparently anyone else who wanted to watch the negotiations. Trillix seemed uncomfortable with the audience until someone brought her a cup of tea and a plate of fresh bread. The Centaurian species didn't typically eat human food, but apparently the smell was appealing enough that she made an exception. "This is excellent," she admitted after a cautious taste. "Honey badger bread," announced Marcus Webb, the settlement's primary baker. He was a massive man who'd been a frontline combat medic before retiring to pursue his passion for artisanal baking. "Used honey from our own hives. The badgers protect them from local predators." "The badgers don't raid the hives themselves?" "Oh, they tried. Once, then they met the bees." "I'm almost afraid to ask." Marcus grinned. "Turns out earth bees and honey badgers have an understanding. The badgers leave the hives alone, and the bees don't make their lives miserable. It's diplomacy, Ambassador. Even nature understands it when properly motivated." Trillix's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Perhaps there's a lesson there. "Perhaps there is," Jack agreed, settling into his chair at the head of the table. Emma sat beside him with Maya on her lap, while Maggie claimed a spot underneath the table where she could monitor everyone's feet for potential threats. Or snacks. With honey badgers, motivations were flexible. "Let's be direct," Jack began. "Councillor Prax wants us gone so he can exploit mineral deposits. We want to stay because this is our home. The environmental regulations are being used as an excuse, not a legitimate concern. How do we resolve this?" Trillix set down her tea, her expression serious. "Councillor Prax has considerable influence. He can make legal challenges that would tie this settlement up in bureaucratic proceedings for decades." "So, we're supposed to just surrender?" Emma's voice hardened. "I didn't say that. I said he has influence. But influence isn't absolute. The Council operates on precedent and public opinion. If your settlement can demonstrate clear value to the galactic community, if you can show that your presence here benefits more than your removal would, then Prax's arguments lose strength." "We already file environmental reports," someone called from the back. "Which are excellent," Trillix acknowledged. "But they're just data. What the Council needs is narrative. Story. Evidence that your community represents something valuable beyond economic calculations." Emma's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "You want us to make our case publicly?" "I want you to show the galaxy what you've built here. The diversity of your settlement, the success of your integration with the local environment, the innovation you've demonstrated. And perhaps..." Trillix paused, choosing her words carefully. "The unique methods you've employed for protection and community building. You want us to weaponize the honey badger's viral fame," Jack said slowly. "I want you to demonstrate that humanity's approach to colonization, while unconventional, produces results that benefit everyone, including adorable cubs that millions of beings across the galaxy now watch videos of daily." Marcus laughed. "We're going to PR our way out of this. Public relations is simply diplomacy for mass audiences," Trillix replied. "And right now, Commander Vrelk's footage has made your settlement sympathetic. Beings across hundreds of worlds watched armed soldiers threaten a small child. They watched this magnificent creature." She gestured toward Maggie, who'd fallen asleep and was now snoring in a way that suggested either peace or preparation for murder. "Defend that child with absolute commitment. That resonates emotionally in ways that legal arguments cannot. So we turn this into a media campaign." Emma sounded skeptical. "That seems risky." "More risky than armed confrontation?" "Fair point." Maya, who'd been listening with the intense focus children reserved for things they didn't fully understand but knew were important, raised her hand. "Can I help?" "Sweetie, this is grown-up stuff," Emma began. "But I'm the one they scared. Shouldn't I get to tell people that?" The room went quiet. Jack and Emma exchanged glances, having one of those silent parental conversations that happened in eyebrow movements and subtle expressions. "She's not wrong," Jack finally said. "This started because of her. Maybe she should have a voice in how it ends." Trillix's antennae rotated thoughtfully. A statement from the child herself would be powerful. But we must be careful not to exploit her trauma for political purposes. "I'm not traumatized," Maya announced with the confidence of someone too young to understand the concept. "I was scared, but Maggie made the scary aliens go away. Now I'm not scared anymore. I just want them to stop trying to make us leave." The simple honesty of her statement hit harder than any legal argument could have. This wasn't about regulations or mineral rights or corporate profits. It was about a little girl who wanted to keep picking carrots in her garden and playing with her extremely dangerous pets. "All right," Jack said. "We'll do it. We'll make our case publicly, show the galaxy what we've built, and let them decide if corporate profits matter more than people's homes." "And if that doesn't work?" someone asked. Emma's smile had sharp edges. "Then we remind everyone that humans didn't get to the stars by backing down from fights. And we've got some very enthusiastic allies with anger management issues who'd be happy to help make that point." Maggie snored louder, as if agreeing in her sleep. The next 6 weeks transformed the settlement from a quiet agricultural community into an unlikely media sensation. Trillix proved surprisingly skilled at galactic PR, helping them craft a narrative that emphasized innovation, environmental stewardship, and the universal theme of protecting home and family. They filmed everything. The daily routines, the children learning in outdoor classrooms, the successful integration with local ecosystems. They showed the water reclamation systems that increased stream flow in the protected zone by 18%. They documented the illegal poaching operations they'd stopped. They even filmed Duchess attempting to eat increasingly unlikely objects, because apparently tiny, fearless creature versus inanimate objects was compelling content across multiple species. But the centerpiece was Maya's testimony, recorded simply and honestly in the settlement's main hall. She sat in a chair that was too big for her, feet dangling above the floor, and told her story. "The aliens came with big guns and scary faces. I was playing with my blocks when they surrounded me. I didn't understand why they were so mean. I just wanted my mama." Her voice wavered slightly. "Then Maggie came. She wasn't mean, but she was really, really angry. She made the scary ones go away, and my mama held me and said everything would be okay." She looked directly at the camera with those impossibly large eyes. "We don't want to fight anyone. We just want to live here. We grow food and take care of animals and go to school. Why's that bad? Why do the big aliens want to make us leave?" The footage went viral within hours. Not just viral, but supernova viral. The kind of cultural phenomenon that transcended species boundaries and made people feel things. The Council's official channels were flooded with messages supporting the settlement. Artists created tribute works. Musicians wrote songs. One particularly enthusiastic Galarian poet composed a 17-verse epic about honey badgers that somehow rhymed in 43 different languages. Councillor Prax tried to counter with economic arguments about efficient resource utilization and development rights. But it's hard to argue for evicting farmers when billions of beings across the galaxy have just watched a 4-year-old ask why growing food is bad. The final council vote happened 8 weeks after the initial incident. Ambassador Trillix represented the settlement's interests, armed with environmental reports, economic analyses, public opinion data, and approximately 7,000 hours of honey badger footage that had somehow become central to interstellar diplomatic proceedings. Jack, Emma, and most of the settlement watched the vote via live stream, gathering in the main hall with refreshments and nervous energy. Maya sat with Maggie and the cubs, who'd grown noticeably larger and no less chaotic. Duchess was currently attempting to organize a revolution against nap time, while Chaos had discovered that table legs made satisfying chewing sounds. When the vote concluded, 14-3 in favor of the settlement with 2 abstentions, the hall erupted in cheers. Maya jumped up and down, not fully understanding but catching the excitement. Maggie woke up from her nap, looked around at the celebrating humans, and went back to sleep with an expression that suggested this was exactly what she'd expected all along. "We did it," Emma whispered, pulling Jack into a hug while tears streamed down her face. "We actually did it." "We stood our ground," Jack corrected. and apparently the galaxy decided that mattered more than corporate profits. Trillix's image appeared on the screen, her mandibles clicking in what they'd learned was a Centaurian smile. Congratulations. The settlement is officially recognized and protected. Councillor Prax's development rights have been revoked pending further environmental studies, which, given the bureaucratic timeline, means essentially forever. Thank you, Ambassador, Jack said. For everything. Thank you for reminding the Council what we're supposed to be protecting. Not just resources or regulations, but people, communities, the things that make civilization worth having in the first place. That evening, as the sun set over the settlement painting the sky in colors that Earth never had, the colonists gathered for an impromptu celebration. Someone had baked a cake. Someone else had brought out instruments. Children ran around playing tag, while adults shared food and stories and relief that they could keep building their future here. Maya sat with Maggie and the cubs, feeding them small pieces of chicken and telling them about her day as if they understood every word. And maybe they did, in their own way. Honey badgers might not care about council votes or diplomatic proceedings, but they understood family. They understood home. They understood the simple right to exist without fear. Jack stood with Emma, watching their daughter giggle as Chaos attempted to climb onto Maggie's back for a better view of the festivities. Think they'll leave us alone now? Probably not, Emma admitted. Someone else will try something eventually. There's always someone who thinks profit matters more than people. And we'll handle it. Yes, we will. Together. Maggie looked up at them, made direct eye contact with an intensity that seemed to convey understanding beyond what should be possible for a creature with a brain that small, and then returned to grooming Chaos despite his protests. The honey badgers didn't care about politics or economics or the complicated machinery of galactic civilization. They cared about their territory, their family, and their absolute right to exist exactly as they were, without compromise or apology. Somehow, that simple philosophy had helped save a human settlement and reminded an entire galaxy that some things mattered more than efficiency, profit, or convenience. They'd pointed weapons at an Earthborn child, and they'd learned the hard way that humans protected their own, with legal arguments when possible, with violence when necessary, and apparently with small, furious mammals that evolution had specifically designed to make everyone else's life difficult. The stars came out, brilliant and countless overhead. Somewhere among them, bureaucrats were filing paperwork and corporations were adjusting strategies. But here, on this frontier world, children played and parents built their futures, and honey badgers protected their territory with the same fierce dedication they'd brought to Earth's savannas millions of years ago. The galaxy had tried to move them. The galaxy had failed. And somewhere in her sleep, Maggie dreamed of carrots and chin scratches and all the aliens who'd learned better than to threaten her humans. She didn't care about much, but what she did care about, she protected absolutely. That was enough.